Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Photography Made Simple podcast with me, your host, Audrey-Anne from Live Snap Love, where I help multi-passionate photographers capture the beauty of their everyday life through photography. So if you've been feeling frustrated because you've spent months learning about photography, but you still don't feel like you understand what you're doing, you've probably wondered how long it actually takes to learn photography. Now, I know from personal experience that it can feel really overwhelming, it can be really frustrating, and it can just feel like it's taking far too long. A lot of the time, we'd like to just skip the learning part and start getting good photos just from the day that we pick up our camera, which begs the question, how long does it actually take to learn photography, or at least good enough that you feel confident saying you're a photographer? Well, that is what we're going to look at today in this podcast episode. Now, I am going to say right from the start, I don't know exactly how long it will take you. Everything I say here is going to be a generalization. Everyone is unique with different circumstances and so on. But I can give you a damn good idea based on my own personal experience, but also, and probably more importantly, from teaching over 2,000 students in my Auto to Awesome program and from helping thousands more over the last 8 years here at Live Snap Love. So let's start by talking about my photography journey and how long it took me to learn photography. So I first picked up a camera with the intention of learning photography back in 2007. And I actually quickly gave up. So that was probably later in 2007, maybe 2008, because I really just couldn't figure it out. And I had actually taken one of those Open University courses that you get here in the UK. I'm not sure if you have an equivalent in other countries, but it's basically an online learning program. And it was awful. It was all about refraction and circle of confusion. And it taught me about this technical side of photography, about how my camera worked and what things were called. But it really didn't teach you how to take great images. And this course really put me off photography. And it wasn't until my son was born in 2009 that I started to learn again. And that's because I wanted to document every moment with my son. I was excited to pick it up again. So it kind of overcame not my fear, but hesitancy around learning photography, because I had a really clear purpose and reason why I wanted to learn and learn quickly. But from this point, so from picking up my camera again in 2009, it actually took me around 3 years before I was taking decent images, and then maybe a further 6 months to a maximum of a year of practicing until I could really confidently get the photos that I saw in my head on demand. So I knew that I could walk into pretty much any situation, take a photo like I saw it in my head, probably around 3 to 4 years. So if we don't include that false start in 2007, I would say it took me around 3 to 4 years from being a total beginner to having learnt photography. But let me dive into that a little bit more for you and how I spent those 4 years, because that's really important. So I spent the first 2 years trying to figure it out on my own. So I would be reading blog posts, I'd be watching videos, I would be reading interviews, just, various locations trying to pick up bits of information. And I definitely did that. I definitely picked up lots of really useful information, but nothing really connected. And I always had this feeling like I was missing something, because no matter how many blog posts I read, no matter how many video tutorials I watched, how much I practiced, I couldn't always get the images I wanted. Sure, I lucked out from time to time, but there was no consistency. I didn't feel confident about my photos or in my abilities. I knew that I was winging it. I knew that it wasn't because I knew exactly what to do. It's just because I had lucked out. And this was an incredibly frustrating time. So if this is where you are now listening to this, I completely understand what you're going through, and I feel for you because it's really, really frustrating to have all this knowledge but still not be able to get the images that you want. Now, at this point, I just admitted defeat to trying to do it on my own, and I enrolled in a few different photography courses in quick succession just because I was so determined to figure this whole thing out. So although I definitely already knew a lot of what was in those courses, there was so much in there that I didn't know because I hadn't even known to search for it. Now that is something that I hear all the time from people who join us in our Auto to Awesome program who have that bit more experience. They just didn't realize certain things. In other words, they didn't know what they didn't know. But now that they had all the information, all that random bits of knowledge that they'd picked up in the past finally started to connect, and it all felt like it was coming together. Now, once you have all this information, once you have the right knowledge, it becomes all about the practice. So I've said this several times. With photography, you need to have the knowledge before you practice. So practicing without knowledge is useless, and knowledge without practice is also useless. You need both working together. So it does take a few months until you have built in the muscle memory for everything that you've learned, and just to give you the time to try out different things. For example, different lighting situations or different focusing techniques. So once you have that knowledge, there is a little bit of time for you to actually put it all into practice. Now, what about other people? That was my photography journey. What about others? Because as I've said, I've had the pleasure of meeting and teaching thousands of photographers over the years. And I can tell you that this 3-year mark is consistent with people who try to go it alone. So sure, there have been some people who've maybe done it in 2, others who took longer, maybe like 4 years, but the average is around that 3-year mark. Now you'll notice that I said go it alone because it is a different timeline for those who invest in their learning right from the beginning, rather than waiting until they couldn't figure it out on their own like I did. And they would get there faster. That is usually around 3 to 6 months. Because instead of having to spend months reading random information on different blog posts, then trying to patch it all together, then trying to figure out what you've missed, you can skip straight past all of that and go right to practicing. So you can get better much more quickly. So when it comes to learning photography, there is a trade-off between time and money, as there is with absolutely everything else in life. If you want to save time and get to the end result faster, then have some of the hard work done for you and purchase a course. If saving money is more important to you, save the cash and try to learn yourself, but just know that it will take you longer. You are buying a shortcut. You're essentially buying time when you take a course. Now, my personal recommendation is this. If you are short on time, struggling to get the photos you want, or it's just important to get better photos quickly, for example, because you don't want to miss out on your child growing up, which I did. I didn't capture the first 3 years the way I wanted to. Or maybe you have gone into retirement and you're going to be traveling and you want to get great photos there, then take a course. It will provide you with that shortcut. When you have all the information available to you, laid out in the order you need to learn it, with every step connecting to the last, you will be able to move forward quicker. Now, this is just my opinion, so you can take it or leave it. Time is always the most important consideration. That's because time is a finite resource. We can never, ever, ever get more of it, no matter what we do. So nowadays, I am ruthless over preserving my time. If I can spend a little money to save years of time, then these days you can bet your bottom dollar that I'm going to take it. I don't know if it's a side effect of getting older, but I am ruthless with preserving my time. Now, I created my Auto to Awesome program exactly for this purpose. So if you want something that will get you from A to B in the shortest amount of time and with the least amount of frustration, then be sure to check it out. There is 3 years worth of knowledge distilled into a 6 to 8 week program right there. If you go to the show notes for this episode at livesnaplove.com/28, I'll link to it there, and I'll also link to it in the description around where you're listening to this podcast. Now, if saving money is more important to you and you have all the time in the world, then that's fine too. You will absolutely still get there. It will just take you that bit longer, and you may have periods of frustration where you can't figure it out and you feel stuck, but you will eventually move past that and get you where you want to be. Now, I can help you here too. Just grab a copy of my free 90-day photography learning blueprint. It will give you a roadmap to follow of what you should be learning and in what order. So at least you have something to work to. Again, I will link to that in the show notes for this episode or around where you're listening to this podcast. So to sum that up, a rough guide would be 3 to 4 years if you go it alone and 3 to 6 months with a course. So if you invest in your learning by taking a course and you can put in a few hours a week to practice your craft, then you are going to be at the shorter end of that timescale. And if you are going to try and piece together everything via the internet and you can only pick up your camera for an hour every 2 weeks, then it's going to take you at the longer end of that timescale. Now, this is also why you cannot measure your growth against anyone else's growth, as you may very well have taken different paths to get there. So if you're currently jealous that someone you know is getting better quicker than you, maybe they've invested in a course or they're spending more time on it than you. Simply focus on your own journey and do what you need to do to reach your goal within the time frame that you want. Now, one more thing I want to say before we head off for the day is that in photography, you can probably always be learning. Because when you've got that technical side down, you understand your camera settings, you're taking beautifully exposed images, they're tack sharp, you have that understanding of light, you'll probably want to branch out and try even more things and get even more advanced with your use of light and composition. And you'll probably always want to try out something new because it keeps things fresh and exciting. It could be a new style of photography like macro or black and white, or it could be new subjects like architectural photography or street photography, or it could be locations. You might want to try underwater photography. That's what makes photography such an amazing hobby, because you will literally always have something new to try and therefore something new to learn. Now, if you head to the show notes for this episode at livesnaplove.com/28, then you will find links to some photographers' case studies on the blog. So we've had some of our students over the years come on, go over their photography journey, how they started, what went wrong, what happened, what they do now. And I think you'll find it really interesting to hear other people's stories about their photography journeys. And you can start to see the patterns that emerge there as well. So go to the show notes. You'll find that at livesnaplove.com/28 or around where you're listening to this podcast. You'll find those links plus that link to the 90-day photography learning blueprint if you want to grab that as well. So that's it for today. But if there is something that you would like me to cover on the podcast, then I would love to hear from you. I want to talk about what you want to listen to. So you can either come and find me on social media as @LivesNapLove on either Facebook or Instagram. Or if you go to the show notes for this episode, I'm going to link to a form where you can pop in any suggestions that you might have, and then that way I can map out my content calendar for the next little while and hopefully answer one or two of your questions. So thanks for being here as always, and I'll see you again really soon. Bye for now.